The Brewhouse was created to capture and share with you the long history of the Genesee Brewery. But the brewery itself isn't half as interesting as the beer and the people who make it. Visit GeneseeBrewhouse.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. First of all, thanks to Toby Matika for starting in the seat the last 2 weeks. Did a great job. Welcome back, Gregg Kegel, Major League pitcher extraordinaire, and looking really good in that suit this week. Embarrassingly good.
All right, I appreciate that. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Nice to see you. Mike Catalana, good to see you again.
And then you got this.
What?
What are you wearing?
This jersey's mint. It's the last jersey the Seattle Supersonics ever wore. Kevin Durant. Third team, second franchise for Kevin Durant, which is always weird, right?
Yeah, it's a great looking. And Seattle's going to get a team again someday.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Yeah.
Hey, let's talk some baseball. The cold weather has dominated. They had a crowd of under 1,000 in Chicago for an afternoon game against Tampa. But overall, the start of the season, what are your takeaways?
I think that one of the most impressive parts of the beginning of the year is, chemistry is so important in professional sports, and you see, leadership change and clubhouse change and how that relates to success on the field, and what's going on in Boston right now. And I'm not a huge Red Sox fan, but it's certainly fun to see.
There's room, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure there is. But like I said, I'm sure it's exciting to see that kind of camaraderie play out in success on the field.
And the Mets, same record.
Yep. And the Mets, it's pitching, right? At the end of the day, it's, pitching. They got a couple of young arms out of the bullpen that are just stingy with runs right now. And when you've got young guys that are hungry and they're pitching well, pulling them out of maybe what would normally be a starting role for them, and they're pitching in a bullpen and having success is, it's exciting for Mets fans.
So, Mike, I'm always interested in the culture change. Yeah. I mean, baseball fans won't go out to see a game in 30-degree weather, and football fans embrace it.
Well, and I mean, you got 16 games or only 8 home games. And it's funny, I was thinking about this with the Red Wings, because a lot of times people will say, well, wait a minute, why don't they play all the games in the South to start the season? Because if you live in Richmond or Charlotte and it's 52 degrees, you're thinking, well, in another couple of weeks it's going to be 65, and you don't like it. In Rochester, we're got some pretty hardy fans that'll go, but seriously, do you want to sit outside for a baseball game when there is 80 home games or 70 home games when it's cold and windy? And I think that mentality is different.
Well, it goes even further than that. The NFL, the NBA, the NHL, and Major League Baseball have done an unbelievable job of presenting their game on television, which is great, except when you're trying to sell tickets when it's 30 degrees outside in April and March, right? Like, why would I spend the money that it takes on a Major League ticket to go sit and get snowed on and spend $12 a beer on the low end when I could sit at home, watch MLB Network? I have televisions all over that are catching every game, and I'm getting replay from every angle along with information from my favorite play-by-play guy.
And Pat makes a good point, because let's face it, for baseball especially early in it's about the experience. That's not a fun experience to sit out for a it really isn't when it's cold. I imagine what it's like when you're playing in that.
It slows the game down tremendously. Part of the fun of watching baseball is the speed of it, right? It's a game that we played when we were 8 years old. Everybody can play it, so you got a lot of armchair pitchers or managers the next day, right? But what's fun about the Major League level is watching a play that's just something that we couldn't do, and usually that's speed or power or velocity, and you lose some of that when you get into real cold weather.
What's the worst you played under? And as a pitcher, I mean, did you ever feel like your career was in jeopardy because you were being forced into conditions you didn't want to play under?
No, I was never far enough. I was never important enough to ever think that my career was in jeopardy. I was happy to just have an opportunity, to get a chance to pitch. But as far as worst, I'd say probably seasons, in 97 when I was with Toledo, it was awfully cold to start the year, and it just, velocity, your every pitch is tracked, and there's charts, and they keep track of your velocity being down, so you're having conversations. Yeah, they understand it's cold, but it's tough to get a call up when you're throwing 88 versus 92.
What for you is the line? I mean, they played games in Minnesota, which is near Toledo, somewhat near Toledo, and temperatures under 30 degrees this last week.
I mean, if you're under freezing, it's tough to play baseball. But again, I think that all of these nuances and all of these different characteristics of each city, that creates home field advantage, and teams create toughness. And we loved that the parquet floor in Boston, didn't dribble right, and you needed to know where to go. But that was part of the mystique of being a Boston fan or playing for the Celtics. And the same thing with being a cold weather team in October or August, or excuse me, September. Those dog days or the end of the season. If you're a cold weather team that can thrive and play in those, pitching and defense wins, and that's a lot of times for that reason.
It's easy to convince a guy who grew up in the Dominican Republic that that's
true. I should say, Horseheads is awful cold.
This is the Rochester Press Box presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. We talk Bills next. The Press Box, brought to you in part by Connors and Faris, your workers' comp attorneys. Call 262-COMP, C-O-M-P, today. Welcome back. This is the Rochester Press Box presented by the Genesee Brewhouse, and this portion brought to you by Connors and Faris. So the Buffalo Bills get thrown a curve this week.
Yeah, the Incognito thing. Of course, they already had the Eric Wood one, too. Look, they have a lot of holes on this team. These are two that were unexpected. The Wood thing happened a while ago, so they've been trying to bring in some veterans. I think they were taken by surprise by Incognito. I'm not 100% sure what's going on with Richie, but it does appear that he is going to be done and not playing. That's a spot they weren't planning on replacing for this season as a starter, but I don't think it has any impact on what they're doing in the draft. Now, that doesn't mean guaranteed they're going to trade up and take a quarterback, but they're going to try, and while it hurts, I think Brandon Beane's like this. I think he's trying to find that spot to make that trade, and I don't think this impacts him at all.
It shocks me, with as much time as you've spent in this business, how wrong you are consistently. Because look, I mean, you have potentially, legitimately, 10 teams that could be trying to get within the top 15 to draft a quarterback, right? If there's one thing we know about McDermott and Beane, the general manager of the Bills, they're all about value. They started trading off marquee players last year and getting things back that we were laughing at in return. My point is this. My point is this. Says
all
who?
right, so mark this right now. Bad take alert right here.
My point is this.
Okay.
Point it yourself. Why would you overspend this year to go up and get a quarterback when you have all of these holes that you can fill with your capital, when next year, theoretically, there will be way fewer teams that are looking to draft a quarterback, and you can get the value that you want?
There's always teams looking for quarterbacks, and everybody says the same thing. Here, I'll make the analogy for you. You want to buy a house. You find the house in the neighborhood, the school district, everything you want. Do you have to pay a little bit more? Yes, you have to make that decision. Is it worth it to pay more to get that house? You got other stuff you need to spend money on. You got to save money for college. You got to do all this stuff, but you get it. No, you say, you know what? Next year we'll buy the house, or next year we'll go in the other neighborhood. It's almost as good, whatever it is. You've got to commit at some point. This franchise needs to commit on a quarterback.
You do realize you're a guy who bought a house in Pittsford, and I'm a guy who bought a house in Henrietta, so that's the exact argument that we're having right now?
You could come up. No, you can't come to my house.
There's some very nice neighborhoods in Henrietta.
Oh, mine is. And I think also you have to take into account, what's the level of talent coming into the draft? Is there a strong quarterback crew coming out of the draft this year versus next year? And I think that has to play into whether or not you move up or you try to move up.
That combined with opportunity. They've been targeting this.
They have, and they have 2 number ones. They've got the 2s. They have the ammunition to do it. Now, I say all this, and I tell you, they may have potential deals set up with whether it's the Giants or with the Browns at 4, or whatever it is, and they all might fail. There may be a point where they just cannot get it done, and then they go to plan B. But I still think plan A, no matter what, like this, because they've been planning on it this year, is to go get the quarterback.
How do you know what they've been planning? We've been speculating about planning since McDermott showed up, and we have been wrong.
And they've done exactly
at every.
Well, you might have been wrong.
Really?
And I've been telling you.
I remember Mike Catalana thinking they're going to trade for Kelvin Benjamin at the trade deadline for anybody. I remember Mike Catalana saying that Nate Peterman would start when the Bills had a winning record with an opportunity to beat a team and put themselves.
Those are minor little blips. They have set up the entire franchise. It's funny. The Benjamin move is the one that is out of what they had been doing, which is accumulating picks, setting themselves up to make a deal. I'm telling you now, they are making a deal, they are moving up, and they are taking a quarterback.
Unless they don't, which you just hedged your bets with. Look at this Pittsford guy trying to cover all his bases. Pittsford man.
This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse, and this portion, regrettably, brought to you by Connors and Faris. Like It or Not is next. Here's the Press Box trivia question, brought to you by Market View Liquor, where exceptional customer service meets an extensive selection. Jefferson Road at 390. Here's the Press Box trivia answer, brought to you by Market View Liquor, where exceptional customer service meets an extensive selection. Jefferson Road at 390. Welcome back. This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Like it or not, the Rochester Americans' chances in the Calder Cups now that they're back in it.
I like it a lot. You just got all of your reinforcements back. Your coach, Chris Taylor, is the kind of coach that can take a team like this and win a couple of rounds. The only thing that's a little bit scary, and Mike can attest to this, how good the other teams in the Calder Cup playoffs are. I mean, Toronto especially, they're a team that for years the Maple Leafs have taken care of. They have a really good feeder system coming out of Orlando and the Solar Bears, one of the best jerseys in the ECHL. But they're rock solid. That being said, you have great veteran talent in Porter and Nathan Pache that can take care of you. You got some fantastic young guys. Brandon Gooley, very excited to see. I think we got a couple of rounds in this team.
It's always intriguing that they reshuffle the deck, and the teams that don't make the Stanley Cups in the NHL, that's a huge advantage to the AHL team.
And I think that might be an advantage for the Amerks because the Maple Leafs have held on to a couple of younger guys that could have helped them in the AHL. Because of that playoff run, Buffalo didn't have to.
And there's a little pressure on the whole organization here, which you normally wouldn't have because it's failed so badly in Buffalo this season with the new regime. They've got a lot invested in seeing some success for the Amerks, but they've put the assets in place, and Taylor's done a good job, so hopefully they can do something with it.
Greg, like it or not, Tim Tebow, who may or may not have the opportunity to go play some professional football again, given his baseball career in Binghamton.
You know, I was surprised to see him switch to baseball in the first place. I wouldn't put Tim Tebow on the level of athleticism as, Deion Sanders, Michael Jordan, Bo Jackson, these multi-sport athletes. But he's such a quality person, and he brings such a presence to the organization. It was fun to watch him be a running back in a quarterback's position, and if he's going to be able to do that again in the AAF, I'm not opposed to it. Anything Tim Tebow does, I certainly don't want the wrath of his support to come down on me. So I'll say that I like it.
But as a guy who played baseball, maybe I'd asked you this before when this originally happened. Isn't there an element of being offended by the fact that this guy is just being handed the opportunity that so many guys are trying so hard to get?
I think that it certainly should be looked at as an honor to get the opportunity to play minor league baseball. And I don't think that anybody, no matter where you are in your stature, should get that given to you. Tim Tebow is a phenomenal athlete, and he does things that we couldn't do. I'm not hitting a ball opposite field 380 or 400 feet. So does he have tools that allow? I watched him field balls in the outfield. It's not great. I've played with a lot of guys that were a lot better, but I've played with guys that couldn't hit a ball 400 feet opposite field. So I don't know. I mean, again, the trade-off is work ethic, and is he the type of athlete? Do I see him playing in Major League Baseball? I don't. And so for that standpoint, I mean, I'm certainly better than watching Morgana run around. And,
And Mike, I want to give you a
Tebow
quick,
play.
like it or not, on your Philadelphia 76ers, the NBA playoffs
Look,
begin.
the process has worked because they are one of the best young teams, but I'm not going to, even though it's my team and I've loved what they've done to the end of the year, they haven't played any playoff games yet. I don't know how they're going to react in the postseason. That being said, they have quickly elevated themselves to one of the top teams, certainly in the East, and one of the top teams in the league. Yeah, again, you haven't played a playoff game yet. Now you got to go beat teams 4 times out of 7 games and do it again and do it again. And one of those teams has LeBron James. I'll hold off on that until we see how they are in the playoffs.
This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Unfinished Business is next.
Here is the MVP Experience Stat of the Week, brought to you by Sport Clips, where it's good to be a guy. No appointment ever needed.
And now to Eichel. He floated one.
Boom.
Go-getters, get 2 with Dunkin' Go-Tos. Boom. 2 sandwiches for $2, $3, or $5. America runs on Dunkin'.
Welcome back. This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Unfinished Business, brought to you by Dunkin' Donuts. America runs on Dunkin'. Pat.
We are officially a week away from Patrick Reed's Masters win, another first-time Masters winner. And there are a lot of people that don't like Patrick Reed. If you know his backstory, you know that there are some things in his past, kicked out of college, allegations of cheating, all of these things. There are people that say they don't like him because of his arrogance, but Tiger was arrogant, people love him. Tom Brady's arrogant, people love him. I'm going to tell you why people don't like Patrick Reed. Because he's a fat guy. When I watch sports, whether it's the NFL, whether it's the NBA, whether it's the NHL, whether it's golf, I want to see people that are in way better shape than me doing amazing things. You know why that makes me feel good? Because I don't look like Tom Brady. I shouldn't be able to do what Tom Brady does. I don't look like Jordan. I shouldn't be able to do what Jordan does. But when a guy like Patrick Reed, who looks just like me, when I take my shirt off in front of the mirror to get in the shower, starts doing amazing things that I can't do, makes me feel bad about myself.
That's an image we want.
Yeah.
Even in the shape that I'm in right now, I can't do it. I'm telling you, look back over history. The most hated athletes are the ones that are a little overweight.
Okay, and I'm going to give you one of those, and it's in golf, because my father used to tell me these stories about Jack Nicklaus, and he used to get called Fat Jack, and everybody loved Arnold Palmer, and nobody wanted Jack Nicklaus to win. They didn't want to pass the king, and he was called Fat Jack on the course, and he ends up being
It doesn't explain John Daly, though.
But people hated John Daly when he first showed up, though. You know that.
Well, but he was so unique, and he had that ability to hit the golf ball farther than anybody, so that made him a bit of a freak show a little bit too. But he had success quickly too.
Greg, get us off fat guys.
Well, I think that, we go back to what we were talking about in the beginning about just team chemistry and how important it is to create a culture of winning, and with the Amerks and the conversation of, do you teach people how to win? Is that an important enough aspect in professional sports that you do what it takes to win? Do you bring Tim Tebow in because he sells tickets or because he helps you win? And I think that the teams and the organizations that people follow are the ones that try to win. I don't care if he's fat or not. I want a guy that's going to come in and do whatever it takes to make my team better. If I'm a golfer, or if I'm a baseball player, or if I'm a football player, I'm going to be the best at my craft, and I'll do what it takes to win.
All righty.
That's good. All right, NBA playoffs are starting, and right when the finals ended last year, the narrative was, well, it's going to be the Cavs and the Warriors. The regular season's going to be boring. Nobody's going to care, and we're going to have a rematch. And I'm going to tell you this. There's still a pretty good chance that we do have a rematch. But we actually have playoffs this year. Houston has been fantastic. Golden State looks flawed. Now, they're still great, but they've got injuries. They look flawed. And the West has really, the bottom part of the West is on some teams like Oklahoma City that's going to give people fits. And in the East, it is still LeBron's show. Someone may challenge him. Look, I'd love to see it be the Sixers. It may be Toronto. It may be Indiana. We don't know. It's not going to be Boston. But we know the teams that are going to be there. But I think the playoffs are going to be interesting. It's not quite the NHL where anybody from 1 to 8 can win. But I think this year it's going to be a lot more interesting than just waiting until it's the Cavs and LeBron against Golden State again.
Just because the Sixers have a clear path.
They're going to be pretty good.
Do you hear this man now? Now that he thinks his team is good. Oh, the playoffs are wide open all of a sudden. Look how that worked out for Mike Catalana. I live in Pittsburgh.
Once again, I'm right.
I want to offer a closing word. Section 5 lost a giant last week. Werner Kleeman passed away at the age of 76. This guy was an inspirational speaker, and this guy I really liked. He taught at the coaching certification classes, and he left me with a piece of advice that I want to, in turn, pass along to you. He says, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Rest in peace, my friend, Werner Kleeman. Great man. This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse and Unfinished Business. Brought to you by Dunkin' Donuts. America runs on Dunkin'. Thanks, guys. Greg?
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
It's always good to have you here. Mike, as always. Pat, appreciate it. Go Celtics. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week for the Rochester Press Box.